In this video, we're going to discuss the migration process, some of the obstacles our customers have encountered, and how Kickdrum has helped them complete the migration successfully. Jeremy, what are the different ways to execute a migration, and how long does this process normally take?
Yeah, that's a good question. So normally when we talk about migration and methods for migration, we're talking about things like lift and shift versus refactor or replatform. And we talked about that a little bit in the last video. And that's really the type of work that you're going to do to get there. So lift and shift being just going to take everything and put it on servers in the cloud versus refactoring, modernizing, moving to some cloud native services. But another thing to consider is how do you want to go about moving your application? Do you want to do it by customer? Do you want to do it by workload or by feature, maybe module of the application itself? So I'll talk about a couple of different case studies that we can refer to here. The first one, it was a relatively simpler example of a migration, and it was one where it was migrated on a per customer basis. So in this scenario, they had separate tenancy for their databases. They had a set of customers that were on very large servers. They had another set of customers that were either multiple customers on some servers or they were set onto some smaller servers. And what we did with them was we set it up to migrate on that per customer basis. That actually allowed them to do two things. One, in their data center environment, they were actually running out of capacity. So when they signed new customers, those new customers went directly to the cloud environment. And then at the same time, they could methodically migrate the customers in their data center over to that cloud environment, coordinate it with the planned obsolescence of the servers that they had, and really make sure to maximize the use of that data center as they were shutting it down and moving to the cloud. We talked in the last video about that cost curve that happens during migration. This allowed them to keep that relatively flat or as low as possible. Now, another version, of course, there's going to be much more complicated ones. So I'll talk a little bit about Intelerad, healthcare customer of ours, does medical imaging solutions. In this situation, this was a very large, complex case. They had a lot of different applications. They had acquired multiple companies, and we were looking at how to bring all of that into the cloud over several years, actually. The complexity here is that they had some applications that were multi-tenant databases. They had some that were individual tenants. They had data center environments, and they also had on-prem environments. If you know a lot about the medical industry, you will see a lot of on-prem deployments.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we did was we devised ways to carve up those different applications, for the most part, moving them on a workload basis. So the type of application, the module in the application, we actually had separate projects for different modules of one of their packs or image management solutions, just for the worklist management, just for the image viewing, things like that. What this allowed us to do was to show that with the cloud deployment, we could be reliable, we could have cost savings associated with it, and we could do this where we approached all of the non-on-prem deployments first. And only once we showed the customers that reliability of that cloud environment would we actually move those on-prem instances into the cloud.
Now, the length of a migration is often dictated by that complexity, right? That last example was obviously a lot more complex than the first case study we talked about. And the size of the solution obviously deals with that as well. How do you plan for and execute the really complex migrations before you kind of dive in and deal with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the Intelerad example, really what we had to do was we had to go back and deconstruct the monolith that they had in place. So we would identify the modules, the features, and then create a series of projects. And the key thing there is understanding that this may not be just one project. It may actually be multiple projects that we stack over a course of time to move you into the cloud. And again, that gives us the ability to demonstrate to those customers and the stakeholders the viability of that cloud solution. My recommendation on this, start with the things that are in some sense closest to the cloud. So if you have a data center environment, that's a lot more like a cloud solution than an on-prem environment. So start with those modules that you can move that have a little bit separation from those on-prem deployments. Show that viability, show that it's something that will be reliably usable in the most critical moments like you have in a healthcare. And then, of course, we also want to start with the lower risk components as much as possible. Again, the things that tend to be on prem in a healthcare environment tend to be the things that are most critical, that really are life and death if they aren't deployed correctly. So let's move those things that are lower risk. Let's make sure that those get to the cloud first so that we can build that confidence. And of course, so that we can identify any issues we want to worry about as we move those more mission critical and really life critical applications into the cloud.
Yeah, as software developers, we are always thinking about ways to create incremental value throughout the project and deliver that value as early as possible. Now, obviously, the industries are going to be very specific, right? In a healthcare industry, like you're talking about with that case study, you have to make sure everything's perfect before you move some things to the cloud, but you can still show incremental progress throughout that time. You can show and deliver incremental value, sometimes with the lower risk items that you talk about before you move over to the mission criticals that need to be fully vetted and fully tested ahead of time. But when we think about other industries, a lot of times getting that value in place quicker may be the most important thing for them. And you can do those planning and kind of figure out the best way to deliver that value as fast as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And we work with a lot of private equity clients that do want to see that value early on in their acquisition and hold period. So that is definitely something that we will focus on. Again, this goes back to something that we discussed in the first video, which is what is the business motivation behind your migration? And let's make sure that we align our plan according to that business motivation.
If you're interested in finding a partner that can help you with all of these, please check out kickdrum.com and all the services that we have available.